John, 2008, hello John. In 2008 you made a movie called Men's Group, and it's had quite an impact, but tell us first of all how that came about. You were a producer and co-writer of it, so tell us how it came about.
Michael Joy, my great colleague, director, and I were working on another project, a completely different project, and we were exploring men's business. And as part of that exploration, he told me about going to a men's group. Now, as it turned out, that project that we were working on, we were shortlisted for a workshop, and we had to sign affidavits to say we were available for a 2-week period. Then the night before we were set to hop on our bikes to do the workshop, we got the call to say, sorry, you're on the short list, but you haven't made it. So it meant that we had a 2-week period with nothing to do. So it was either go off to Bali. We had no money, so there was no money for holidays. So I suggested to him, look, why don't we start a film project? And he said, perfect, I've got this great idea. Let's do a men's group movie. And so we were off and running. So that was a Sunday night, and then by the Wednesday we were starting pre-production for a film.
So he had attended a men's group,
yes,
for his own purposes.
Yeah, just one session during a tricky time of his life when he had some questions that weren't being answered, and he went. And the great thing for him was he sat and listened and shared, but by the end of the night he thought, oh, I'm feeling pretty good actually, and I'm feeling really excited because I think there's a film here from that material.
What did he tell you about it, or did he show you something he'd already written? How did he explain what the men's group would do as a film?
Michael's a very intuitive person, and he works on a very intuitive level. So what he discussed with me on that night was 5 main characters. It was just a concept, 5 main characters. No one would ever see a script. The backstory would be worked on over a couple of month period, one-on-one with each actor, where that would then be notated, then turned into a script that the actors were never allowed to see, and the plot would be worked out between Michael and I with input from the actors, but they wouldn't know what we would include or not. And then he would reveal to them before each day's shooting and each scene what they could reveal about themselves as characters. So when they walk through the front door of the men's group for the first time in the film, that's the first time they're walking onto that set. And everything that happens to them is a surprise, and that's what we capture in the film.
Did you, between you, have a clear objective of what this film was going to do?
Yes, in a simple way of answering that was, we knew emotionally what we wanted to communicate, or some of the same main themes. We wanted to talk about some of the taboo subjects, particularly associated with men and middle-aged men and beyond. Some of the things, the vulnerabilities that men weren't talking about in their lives, and certainly weren't talked about in popular culture, certainly not in a feature film. You know, most feature films show men as the hero, and their life is just this sideline thing. We wanted to put central to the story what was going on internally with men. And so our plot is very, very simple. The plot of Men's Group is a bloke goes to a men's group, disenfranchised, blaming his son for their relationship not working. By the end of the film, the central character goes through a transformation, and instead of blaming his son, he understands that a relationship is a two-way street, and he's able to say in front of his friends in the men's group, he's able to say, I love my son, and I don't want my son to repeat the same mistakes that I have made in my life. That's the plot. The plot is a journey of empathy, which is probably one of the greatest journeys any human being can go on in their life, to self-realization and going from being closed through sympathy through to empathy. Now that on paper sounds like a very small journey, but we know spiritually a lot of people don't go on that journey. And it's a journey that we wanted to explore. So in plot terms, it's not very dynamic in terms of car chases, but in terms of emotional beats, absolutely it was.
I have to ask this, it sounds as though you were not a filmmaker at all, but a psychologist. Or have you picked this up in the making of the film? Because that's a fairly sophisticated thing to do as a filmmaker. You'd have to be aware of those issues.
I suppose between Michael and I, when we would have our discussions, you know, over a latte in the coffee shop, as many filmmakers do when they're talking about wanting to make a project, we discovered, I suppose it was our age, we were both fathers, you know, both married, and there's always challenges with any relationship. Some of the sharing that we did, and we have an open and strong bond. We were not friends prior to coming on board the project. We knew each other, but we weren't friends, and we certainly became friends at the end of the process because of the sharing and the level of trust that we got to. What we discovered between us was a wealth of anecdotes, stories, taboo stories that we had gathered from our fathers, our uncles, our brothers, things that you wouldn't normally share. But these little stories, these little moments, these little, sometimes moments of humiliation that only a father would understand, but certainly not something you could ever talk about in the pub. You know, on the boys' night, you couldn't say, oh, you know, my mate's divorced and rah, 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 this happened, and he burst into tears. You couldn't tell that story.
And isn't that
in the pub?
Isn't that a problem that you
Yes.
couldn't?
Yes, absolutely.
That's what the film is addressing, I suppose.
That's right. I think it's fair to say men can talk bullshit because bullshit's safe. They can talk about cars, and by bullshit, I respectfully mean external things.
Things that don't really matter.
I would say yes.
Yes.
And by that, I'm going to illustrate that with the old bloke next door to me when I was growing up. I used to see him walk to the RSL at Epping every single afternoon, and he'd stagger home every night. Luckily, he wasn't driving. So he drank every single night at the RSL. And I'd watched that for 20 or more years. And one day when I got, you know, I knew him better. I'd known him my whole life. He was my next door neighbour. I said to him, gee, it must be great up there at the RSL, seeing your mates up there that you've been with. I've seen you go up there for 20 years every single day. I said, so who are your mates that you drink with? And he said, what do you mean, my mates? I said, well, you've been going there for 20 years that I know every single day. Who do you talk to? He said, whoever's standing next to me. And I suddenly realised that the snapshot of the bar, of the RSL, of the TAB, blokes seem to be there together, and certainly some of them are. Some of them are just solo individuals talking nothing to the bartender or the person next to them, not actually fully, deeply connecting. They're escaping their loneliness by simulating a social experience, but not having the one-on-one or the group discussion that perhaps the ladies are having at Ladies Auxiliary when they really chew the fat. Or if you want to get really down to tearing the layers off, when the ladies take their handbags at the Chinese dinner and they all go off to the bathroom and talk. And they actually say something, they actually share something. But the blokes, they don't want, it's taboo. You cannot reveal that soft underbelly. In Australia, there is no safe place unless it's a therapeutic group, unless it's a men's shed, unless it's you're in therapy or a men's group or whatever. You can't reveal it at work, you can't reveal it at the RSL, you can't reveal it down the pub, you can't reveal your underbelly at the the local barbecue, because that you just can't. You're not safe to do so.
Those repressions, those constant repressions, are some of the things that we see the results of in Men's Group in the film, which are of course reflective of what happens in life. constantly repressing that, which then becomes quite sort of a sick mess inside because you haven't got it out.
It's like a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just pursuing this, not for the sake of the film, which we'll have a look at a clip in a moment, but just about that notion that you and Michael talked about these things and became very good friends as a result and shared with them. Did that lead to any other, a change in the way that you were able to behave as a man and still feel comfortable in your identity?
I suppose it was so, like any changes, they're moment by moment, and I came to producing and filmmaking through acting, so I suppose you're always bare as an actor and you're always exploring, and my wife is also a performer, and so I feel in my own home I'm pretty good at self-expression, but I think maybe if there was a change in me through Men's Group, it's certainly the level of empathy that I have towards my fellow man. I think I probably ask my male friends, I think I scratch the surface, I think I try and pull that layer off and ask more probing questions, and I think I hope that I'm giving my friends and myself more permission to talk about what's real, and to not just take the glib answer and go, well, hang on, let's, really, by stepping through maybe being a little more vulnerable. And I've certainly know that I found myself in the last couple of years, I'm a little more prepared, I think, to tell people how I was feeling. I had an incident with my staff where something went wrong, and they were very upset for me because of something that happened in the business, and they felt that people had been very rude and disrespectful to me. And I remember one of my co-workers said, "Are you angry?" And in the past I would have said yes. And I found myself actually being more honest than that. I said, "You know what? I'm not angry yet. I'm just really hurt. I'm hurt by what's happened. And I know in about an hour that hurt will turn to anger. But I'd like to identify with you right now that what's happened has hurt me." And because anger's an easy emotion for blokes to confess to. And I found myself recently as a distributor, a filmmaker, a film that didn't fit within our style of films that we distribute. And I said and I expressed very clearly why we weren't taking this film. And I got a very angry response from the filmmaker in writing, a little naive of me, giving honest feedback, because 101 in that world is to do the Dear John letter, "Dear applicant, at this time, blah, blah, blah," which we all know is insincere, but I didn't really want to do that. Anyway, cutting to the point, I responded to this filmmaker by saying, "I'm sorry my words have hurt you," because I felt that that's honestly what had happened. That didn't get a very good response. That got an even more angry response, the pompous, "How dare you," which I saw as ego talking. So sometimes it's been helpful for me to go down those psychological paths, but I suppose I can only be true to myself now. And I know that I've hurt people and that's produced anger, but I know I've hurt them first.
Do you think that it's possible for, the average male to simply make a decision, well, I need to explore, I've got some problems, I need to explore this, I want to join a men's group? Is it as simple as that? Does that help? Can it always? Have you found that in the years since the film has become a therapeutic tool, have you seen beneficial results? Is I suppose what I mean.
Look, I have. I know I don't know, it's probably up to 100 occasions now where we've screened the film somewhere, or the film is screened overseas, and the response we get from both male and female, always in the therapeutic community sense when the film is screened, they form some type of men's group off the back of it. Because what they see, the simple message in terms of men's groups are concerned, taking away the fact that it's a fictitious drama, what they do go through that experience is talking helps. Does talking help? Yes. No talking? Oh, not too good. Talking? Better. Does it solve all your problems? Of course not. But I think there is strong evidence, and I'm no psychologist, but I think there's very strong evidence to back up the fact that just simply letting it out does something to your brain chemistry. And sharing in a supportive environment, in a safe environment. But it is not easy. It's not easy to get blokes in that room. They need to know that they're safe. It has to be tangibly safe for them.
Did you go to a men's group like Michael?
The only times I've been involved in a men's group is through the film and through like doing research. I have had counselling with male counsellors, and I'm seen a psychologist, and in more recent years, since men's group, I probably wouldn't have seen a psychologist before men's group, but I realised that I had nowhere else to turn when I had some things to deal with, that I couldn't do what I had done in men's group and tour the country doing that, saying talking's good, and then not go and talk myself. And so on a personal level, I have discovered that, talking does help. And so sometimes some of the things you think are issues, when you're simply talking about it, you go, oh, it's not such a big deal. The roof didn't cave in when I discussed that, and I didn't lose my power base or my masculinity, or no one thought that I was a Fruit Loop. Things just continued on the same way.
So let's talk about a little bit about you and your upbringing and your family environment and the role models that you had. Father, mother, tell us about them.
My dad is a very emotional person. Many times he would become emotional, and by that I mean he'd be moved to tears. It might be a sentimental film, or he would express his pride for my brother and I. He'd be very emotional about that. He'd sometimes be, very cranky as well, so it worked both ways. But on an emotional level, he taught, I think, my brother and I that it was okay to let it out at either end. So I think emotionally he was a very good role model in terms of his emotional state. And so I found as a young man with young women, they'd say, wow, you're very emotional. And of course it was great being an actor because I could access those emotions, because I'd been taught that you didn't have to hold back. And so I was able to access my emotions on that level. I come from a small family, just my brother and I, and my mum and dad, with not too many extended. My dad's was an only child, and my mother has only one sister who lives in Queensland. We're a very small unit. So in a way, if there are issues, we have to sort them out, and we have to navigate our way around them. So we have an interesting way of communicating in our family that's very different culturally to my wife's family. They're a big Catholic Maltese family, and with so many people in the family, to get a word in, you have to speak loudly and very quickly and not punctuate your sentences. And you have to state very clearly, you have to call a spade, whereas in my family, when we're around the dinner table, there might be only 4 of us. So we have to sort of skate around issues. And so as not to offend each other, we have a way of expressing something we don't like by first saying we do like it and we do agree. We have this very unusual way of getting to... So with my wife, if my mum doesn't want to mind the kids, my wife will ring up and I'll say, what did mum say? She said, it's fine, we can take the kids. I said, oh no, that means she doesn't want us there. I'm telling you, she said it's fine. Let me get on the phone. Mum, how do you feel about minding the kids? Oh, yes, dear, that'd be all right. Oh, okay, so you're not really comfortable with that? No, no, it's fine, dear. Said, oh, are you really tired? Are you exhausted? Have you had a busy day? And said, well, actually, and then the truth comes out because there's this triple layer of politeness that you have to get through because she'll never say no. Whereas my wife's family, they'll say no first, and you've got to get over that. You've got to beat them down eventually. Oh, all right then. And they're cranky, but then they're resolved to it. Whereas my family will always say yes, but they really mean no. And my wife's family will say no and mean maybe. So that's really, it's taken a while for both sides to understand that communication. And so sometimes I think if my wife says, how are you? And I say, fine, she thinks I mean fine, and I actually mean shithouse.
Do you find that you're able to see beyond the stereotypes now and engage with men and women in a kind of a post-men's group kind of way?
Look, I'd like to think so. Yeah, I don't believe in stereotypes, and in fact, I think it's quite destructive. I find sometimes younger women are still talking about the whole stereotype thing, and oh, men behaved this way because women in the 1700s were goods and chattel, and blah 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 blah. I think we try to construct our understanding and meaning of relationship from a historical context that sometimes is really unhelpful because it stops us seeing what's really happening inside the moment. I think sometimes the differences, too much is made of the differences between culturally, gender. The differences between gender are not as profound as our similarities. One of the great things I discovered from men's group, and this will sound funny as it was in the forum, a woman during a forum said, this film was a revelation to me. And this is verbatim. I had no idea men had feelings. The audience, of course, laughs. And she said, no, 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 I knew men had feelings, but I didn't know they felt like us. And it was such, I can only repeat that as verbatim because it was a profound moment for her and many, many women. One of my favourite emails was from a lady who represented a whole group they'd come from the office, a group of girls, oh, we're going to see this film, see what it's about. They said, we all met at the water cooler the next day at 11 o'clock. And we want you to know something. We've made a resolution. We're going to speak to our men differently. And that some of us cried, not only on the night, but the next day. But we felt ashamed at how we'd behaved, particularly those of us who had ex-partners and we were denying access to children and we were using children as pawns, and how cruel that was to the father. And okay, we don't have to like him, but we realised we'd actually been cruel. And we didn't make the film to do that. We only made the film to tell the truth within a context, and what other people take from it is what they take from it. But to get that was a really interesting, significant thing. I have realised that for some people, they do see men as being a different type of creature. They don't realise the masking that men do, and that it is a mask. And what I've realised, my journey of discovery is to realise too that men are very vulnerable with relationships, and they feel, of course, exactly the same as women, just as deeply. They just don't demonstrate it in the same way, but it absolutely kills them. When a relationship breaks up, a serious relationship breaks up, it's very, very difficult for men. And when they have been denied access to their children, some of them simply don't survive it.
How do we explain men behaving badly you know, there is a culture that we see, we certainly see a lot of sportsmen behaving very badly towards women, particularly. How do we explain that in this context, do you think?
Look, I hate it. I grew up, I went to Epping Boys High School, which was a sporting school, and I was in drama, I was in choir, so of course, because I sang, I was a homosexual. And,
And therefore a target.
and a target, yes, I must be gay. And of course, not only was I gay, but I was trying to root all of them. Which of course none of that was true. It was ridiculous. And luckily, I had a group of friends, and we all stuck together, and we were able to rise above that abuse and then give our own back. But being in that heavy male culture of homophobia, and you're not allowed to show any type of affection or gentle side or what would be called your feminine side, but of course I disagree with that. That's just, it's another way of containing, disenfranchising men by saying, oh, you're showing your feminine side. What, isn't masculinity only stabbing someone with a spear? I mean, why can't you have a gentle fatherly side that is innocent and beautiful and nurturing? Getting back to your question, all I can think of, I suppose, is the genesis of it perhaps is a hormonal thing, that fighting, angry, easy to access anger, the lack of encouragement of emotional intelligence, the belittling of emotional intelligence. I remember my father used to talk to me about intuition. He didn't think that's what he was doing. For him, I'd say, what should I do, Dad, about X, Y, Z? He'd say, what's your gut saying, son? To me, I then interpreted that as, oh, he's talking about not my rational brain. You know, when I was older, I realised, oh, Dad's, going on his gut instinct, on his instinctive level. He never said the word feminine intuition. But yet in popular culture, from Bewitched and beyond, oh, that's my feminine intuition. So like, how can intuition have gender? And so I think young boys, especially growing up in the 70s, we were told, and forgive me for saying this, but we were told we were rapists, we were misogynists, we were part of the patriarchal system, we were oppressors of women, we were told we were the boogeyman, and that all of the sins of the world were committed by our gender, and that we must be made to atone for that. Now, when you are coming into maturity, when you're 14, 15, 16, you're being told that by teachers, you're told that by popular culture, and you're told that over and over by your female peers at parties and barbecues in the 70s and early 80s. It was very, very hard. We were made to feel ashamed to be men. Luckily, I surrounded myself with the right women, but there were times I'd come home in screaming tears because of this terrible abuse of being male. Not because, if I was slapping a girl on the bum, I'd expect to be abused, but just being me, just talking, being another person. I saw myself as a person first who happened to be male, not, this bull running around trying to...
And you had no way of defending yourself against
No,
that.
well, you can't. You can't. The first time a young woman looks at you and says, you are a rapist, and you're a virgin, and you say, well, excuse me, but I'm not. So no. And then you're told all men are potential rapists. I mean, that's probably not even true biologically. And that's I suppose I'm digressing, but somehow within that culture of demonizing men, there's not an appreciation for encouraging. You can criticize bad, but modern thinking, I've been to puppy training. You train a puppy nowadays, When I was a kid, you trained a puppy, when it did a poo on the carpet, you rubbed its nose in it. You humiliated it over and over and over. And the dog was supposed to understand the connection between excrement and its nose and humiliation. Now the puppy trainer says, oh, it's a ridiculous concept. When they're about to do a poo, you whip them outside, they do a poo in the garden, you give them a treat. So they go, oh, this is okay, I learned that weeing in the garden, pooing in the garden, you get rewarded for it and it's the right thing. And the other behaviour is ignored. I think sometimes what has happened culturally between genders, the bad behaviour has been amortised across 2 billion people, going back from Genghis Khan, and we're carrying the sins of the fathers forward. Being who you are, you're seen through this, as male, you're seen through this other framework that actually may or may not fit at all. And so then maybe I think a lot of men can become that. Because my father certainly never hit my mother. And my brother never hit his, and I've never hit a woman. I've shouted sometimes, so I'm only human. But that behaviour doesn't exist in my culture. You don't hit people when you're frustrated. And so I suppose it's modelling. If you hear that you're a boogeyman your whole life, that maybe you live up to that. Maybe the modelling has backfired. You can demonise bad behaviour and you put so much emphasis on it, you cause it to repeat over and over and over. But if we reward and model good behaviour and attribute to it masculine as opposed to feminine, maybe it is compassion and love and tenderness are just as legitimate in the masculine form as they are in the feminine. So we've got to stop saying to men, the greatest insult when I was at school was, don't be a girl. It's the worst thing you could say to anyone. You're such a girl. That was attributed to you when you were having a tender masculine moment, or you were revealing your underbelly. So your teachers would say that, your sports master would say that, your peers would say that. Girl, 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 girl.
Yeah, we forget the power of language. And the destructive power of language is as powerful as the positive power of language. One thing I want to ask you about, you mentioned it, and you've admitted in this confession that you sometimes shout at people when you get angry. Anger management is an issue for men because anger is so readily available to the male psyche, I suppose, or in many cases. Is there something that you've found that works for you to manage it on a daily sort of, at that level, not the extreme levels, I'm talking about just the day-to-day?
I think what I'm trying to do in my life, what I'm trying to do is direct my anger where appropriate. If someone has violated me, to try and direct it to them. I found I would wind up with tension with a whole lot of stuff happening at work. I'd come home still on the mobile, still irritated about some contract or other. Kid comes for a hug or a chat or a tie my shoelace or one time too many, bang, they get it.
What do they get?
They get a shout. They get a...
Yes, I just wanted to make clear that
yes. No, they don't get... don't have me arrested. No, they get a... Grumpy, a snap.
Yeah.
They'd get a snap response, not commensurate with what they're asking for. And then you see the sooky face and then, what did I do? And in that honest moment, I go, actually, darling, you did nothing wrong. Daddy's still in his head at work, angry with the person he should have been angry with. And so in a strange way, I think what I'm trying to do now is to go, well, I should be shitty and angry with people who make me shitty and angry. In a controlled way, but maybe just let it out. Maybe then, rather than sucking it up, maybe saying, well, actually, I disagree with that, and resolving it rather than sucking it up. for it to explode.
It becomes
fuel for something else,
Yes.
and then it's out of. Then you've got this pressure cooker of emotion that gets vented on the wrong person. I was in the bank the other day, and this fellow, there's a queue out the door. He finally gets to the teller, and he shouts at her, shouting. This poor woman hasn't had a break all day because the queue's out the door. I thought I'd better intervene. I said, "Excuse me, sir, can you see Wendy here?" Now, Wendy's not the chairman of the Westpac Banking Corporation. I know you're frustrated. We're all frustrated. She would put more staff on if she could, but she's on an hourly rate here, and she's not the chairman of the board. So please express your anger, one, where it's going to do the most good, and not to the person who is dying also of frustration. You know, can't you see that you're unreasonable? So yeah, so people love having me around after men's group.
Did he respond well?
He knew that I was right, and he did calm down. It was hard for him to accept an interfering busybody. The teller was grateful because someone actually could see the real situation. But I just thought I didn't want to drive home angry in the traffic. I thought that you're behaving irrationally and rudely, and calmly, without ego, I'm going to try and set this right. And I know sometimes I've behaved badly, and sometimes I've gone back and apologised. You know, when the fuel pump doesn't work, and what are you thinking? Like, oh, you're not thinking anything. You're just trying to get through your shift. And so I remember one time I behaved rudely. You know, I called out and shouted out and acted out to the poor fuel pump attendant. I said, obviously I don't understand how the system works, and I know that it's not your fault, and I'm just behaving badly. Please forgive me for being an arsehole.
And you felt better?
Oh, I felt fantastic. And he said, oh, it's okay, mate, I understand. All of a sudden, we were just two blokes, instead of me seeing him as the other, as the outsider.
Yes.
And I think sometimes, especially in Sydney traffic, we've all got to see, no, I didn't deliberately cut you off. Can you stop honking your horn at me?
How do you, if you were asked now, because you probably are asked to give advice to men who, often going through that well-known thing that I don't know how to behave as a man in that situation. Is there a mantra that you've learned?
I think walk a mile in someone else's shoes, put yourself in someone else's situation. What would you do if you try and understand what the situation is and really see it? Who is this person? You've made them so powerful. You've made them evil. You've demonized them in some way, or you've made them ignorant. They're none of those things. They're just another bloke trying to get through the day, or another woman trying to get through the day.
You're talking about empathy and insight. To develop empathy and insight.
Oh, it's crucial. I think Obama talks about that. He talks about the empathy deficit, and that's the elephant in the room. There's the financial deficit, but it's the empathy deficit. That's what has the power to destroy the world. It has the power to heal the world, and I think we're winning. And I think people, on the whole, do have empathy, and if we can ignore some of the myths that are pumped out through the propaganda machines, I think your average person has the facility for kindness, and I think if people are, I think at their core, I think people do want to help and do want to understand, but there are certain pressures as mortgage and work and that drive you to that non-empathetic state. But I think we're going to have a swing around where people will talk about it more. And I think we wear different jerseys, different football teams, and we want to see, oh yeah, they're the rabbits and they're the eels or whatever, and we don't like them. And you can swap that. We're the Jews and we're the Catholics and we're the Buddhists and we're the weather. But when you boil it all down, we love our kids. We go do work, we come home, we love our husbands and our wives, whether it's been an arranged marriage or not. It is the love that holds us together, and we are confused about life, art and the universe, and we are, as men, confused about our role. but we kind of know intrinsically our role is not to be cruel, not to be brutes, but to be compassionate and loving. And I think in our hearts we do believe in fairness. I think through all cultures and all religions, I think fairness has a part to play. But unfortunately, I think where we go astray is when we see ourselves as victim, when we don't realise how powerful we are, when we forget our power, we see that we're a victim. That's when we want to lash out. If we're in our empathetic state and we go, oh, why are you so irritated? As opposed to, why are you doing this to me? If we're able to see that that other person is also a little pressure cooker and vulnerable. And we see other people as powerful and see ourselves as powerless.
These are also some of the things that we see through the film, which we'll end our interview with a clip from the film, but I wanted to say thank you for sharing all that information with us. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
I wanted to tell you, I'm sort of busting to say this, but I had a call from my son. Lost for fucking words for the first time in my fucking life. I tell you, there was a long fucking silence, and you know, oh jeez, I said, son, you know. Anyway, you know, it got me thinking about a lot of things, and my old man, and you know what you were saying, Moses. You know, my old man, he was a fair dinkum bullshit fucking artist. There's no two ways about it, but. You know one thing, I loved him. I never said that. And never once in his life did he say to me, son, I love you. I don't want my son to grow up like me, regretting fucking time past. I went and I saw a few of his trophies that he's won, and he'd put his name over some other bastard's name to make it look as though it was his stuff. I don't want him to do that. I don't want him to do that. I want him to lead a life that I haven't fucking had. What else can I say?
You know, my boy just sent me this T-shirt from Singapore, and sent me this bike. And mate, I'm gonna give this thing to you, mate, because I reckon it represents freedom, and I reckon you're on the right track. I reckon you're on the right track.
Thanks, mate. Geez, you look fucking different.
You, mate.